I don't usually cover current affairs, but right now there are some dangerous people in charge of autism policy in the US, and we should be talking about it. On April 28th, the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee met for the first time since Trump was re elected. The IACC is tasked with advising the US government on autism policy, specifically the allocation of funds for services and research. The members of the IACC are appointed by the government, and when I started writing this, I thought I was going to tell you that some of these appointments are incredibly concerning, but it is so much worse than that. So let's have a look at who these people are.
Hang on, this is gonna be bad.
Daniel Rossignol, an American family medicine doctor. According to his Wikipedia page, he runs the Rossignol Medical Center, which has offices all over the place. And he also works at the Wisconsin Integrative Hyperbaric Center. Put a pin in that. Also, I hope you've got a lot of pins. He's a member of the Physician Advisory Board for the Autism Community in Action, which is an absurdly misleading name. TACA used to be called TACA, but back then it stood for Talk About Curing Autism, and it faced a lot of criticism for its relationship with the anti vax movement. According to its Wikipedia and this article, it was a sponsor, actually an organizer, of the Green Hour Vaccines March in Washington, D.C. in 2008, along with Generation Rescue, an organization run by Jenny McCarthy, which at times was called Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey's Autism Organization, Jenny McCarthy's Generation Rescue, and Jenny McCarthy's Autism Organization. Love that for us. And groups like Healing Every Autistic Life and Moms Against Mercury. Sounds like a fun bunch. After that Andrew Wakefield's study into autism and vaccines was retracted and he got into trouble, a spokesperson for TACA allegedly insisted that they still trust Wakefield's research. TACA currently claims to be supporting autistic people and their families, but their services seem to mostly involve parent support groups and events, one-on-one virtual parent coaching sessions, and they also offer what they call a scholarship, which seems to be a way for parents to apply for $1,500 to support their treatment journey. They are accredited by Rossignol's Medical Center and they have a neat little section on how to find a doctor. So, good ways to find a good doctor include hooking up with your local TACA chapter. I'm gonna guess they mean like meeting up, not hooking up, you know. Oh, well, maybe not, I don't know. Or if you can't hook up with them, joining their private Facebook group where apparently they have a file, attending a TACA conference to see doctors speak in person, and becoming a member of TACA so that you can access webinars by doctors. Before we continue, in this video, I'm going to be doing a lot of like jumping around different organizations and people, and I know that can be confusing. Don't worry, I get confused too. But it does somewhat illustrate one of the points I'm making. The autism treatment industry is huge money, huge power and influence. And a lot of the time, you find a relatively small group of people at the center of a web of various organizations, centers, and studies. Maybe you've heard of the term astroturfing. That's the practice of manufacturing a facade of popularity. You know, like when the political bots all rush into the TikTok to all comment the same thing, trying to breed this sense of broad public opinion. These multiple interconnected groups work hard at manufacturing a cloak of legitimacy, but they're not legitimate. They are offering disproven, unscientific, and sometimes dangerous treatment under very little scrutiny. And they can always wave research papers and studies around because they're the ones writing them. Rossignol, for example, cites his own study on his medical center website. He advises multiple autism organizations while, the whole time, selling supplements.
Hey, I'm Dan Rossignol. I'm a physician who treats a lot of kids with autism. One of the biggest problems we find in autism is mitochondrial dysfunction. And so I use a lot of treatments for that as well. And I like using the NeuroNeeds products, especially because one of the more recent studies using mitochondrial supplements on autism used their product and showed benefit. And of course, I have no affiliation with them, but I use their products because I believe them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Apparently he's unaffiliated. Just out of curiosity, let's have a little look at the website here. And oh, wait, what's this now? Dan was also a medical advisor for Dan. That's Defeat Autism Now! Exclamation mark. Dan was set up by the Autism Research Institute, founded by notorious anti-vaxxer Bernard Rimland. Remember that name? Whose tagline is Autism is treatable. Dan advocated for alternative treatments for autism and produced a registry of doctors which it had accredited. Dan accredited doctors rarely had any special expertise in autism or even pediatrics, but they did complete an 8-hour accreditation course. Once accredited, these doctors would perform discredited treatments on autistic children in facilities across the USA and beyond, under little to no oversight, all as part of the Defeat Autism Now network. From the Autism Matrix, Dan maintains a list of doctors who are affiliated with it and whom parents are encouraged to consult. To be affiliated with Dan means that one is willing to consult the Dan protocol, titled Biomedical Assessment Options for Children with Autism and Related Problems. Keep that word biomedical in mind too. To be clear, it means that one is recommending diets, vitamin treatments, chelation, and a variety of other treatments that the medical establishment considers fringe, unproven, alternative, or positively dangerous. It may mean that one agrees with parents that vaccines have caused their child's autism, which is precisely where the battle lines are drawn between established medicine and its enemies. So that was written in 2010, and I think it's worth noting that that line about being anti-vax being where the battle lines are drawn, because I feel like now in 2026, a lot of these same people use distancing themselves from the anti-vax movement as a sort of get out of jail free card, as if like all I need to do is say I don't think vaccines cause autism and I'll seem legitimate, even if what I think is that it's like heavy metals or mercury or toxins or whatever, the same old stuff. Rossignol was named in a lawsuit launched by the father of an autistic child who alleged that Rossignol and another doctor, Dr. Andrew Usman, pin in that, had administered dangerous and unnecessary experimental treatments, including chelation therapy, to his 7-year-old. Now, Dr. Usman was also involved in the care of 5-year-old Abu Bakr Tariq Nadama, who died in 2005 after undergoing dangerously administered chelation therapy by Dan approved doctor Dr. Roy Kerry, a retired ENT who had no experience in administering chelation therapy. But it was Dr. Usman's diagnosis of, quote, very high level of aluminium which led to his referral to Dr. Kerry. From court documents, we have been in communication with Dr. Usman regarding EDTA therapy. He, Tariq, apparently has very high aluminium and has not been responding to other types of therapies, and therefore she is recommending EDTA. EDTA is chelation therapy. Chelation therapy is a useful treatment for heavy metal poisoning. From Defeating Autism, a Damaging Delusion, Chelators work by binding with toxins and rendering them water soluble so that they can be harmlessly excreted in the urine. Very cool if you actually have lead poisoning, of course. But according to court documents and medical records, it remains unclear as to whether Tariq's aluminium levels were actually high. Chelation therapy is also usually administered over a long time, which can be hard for autistic kids. And so instead, they administered his therapy via rapid IV push over the course of 5 to 10 minutes. Not only is chelation therapy a known risk to people who do not have heavy metal poisoning, according to GP Michael Fitzpatrick, author of Defeating Autism, A Damaging Delusion, even if autism were the result of neurological damage from chronic mercury exposure, an unsubstantiated proposition, chelating agents which do not cross the blood-brain barrier could not remove it, or indeed any other heavy metal toxin from the brain. As a treatment for autism, chelation lacks either a coherent theoretical rationale or empirical evidence of efficiency. Dan doctors who, remember, were advised by Dan Rossignol, current member of the IACC, regularly prescribed chelation therapy, dietary supplements and changes, and hyperbaric chamber therapy. Hyperbaric chambers are supposed to be used in the treatment of things like decompression sickness, carbon monoxide poisoning, radiation damages, and cases of severe tissue damage. And they work by the delivery of oxygen to the body by providing pure oxygen in an enclosed space with a higher than normal air pressure. There is no evidence that they provide any benefit to autistic people, and there are risks involved in breathing high levels of oxygen under pressure. Risks of hyperbaric chamber therapy include middle ear injuries, eardrum ruptures and ear pain, sinus pain and nosebleeds, temporary decline in lung function, and less commonly, lung collapse and seizure. When you've got the bends or radiation sickness or tissue damage, I'm sure you don't mind running those risks and taking a turn or two in the chamber. But autistic kids are being subjected to dozens of treatments under highly unregulated and shady circumstances. Circumstances which have led to tragic deaths, including the case of 5-year-old Thomas Cooper. Thomas was in the chamber when a spark of static electricity from his clothing engulfed the chamber in flames. His mother was severely burned, trying and failing to save him. So hyperbaric chambers are a current fave of the MAHA movement.
Make America healthy again, and the first thing you need to do is get one of these hats.
From The Guardian. It's absolutely anarchy and chaos, said John S. Peters, a healthcare executive and the executive director of the professional organization Undersea and Hyperbaric Medical Society, OOMS, which runs the U.S. Hyperbaric Oxygen Facility Accreditation Program. The American Medical Association recommends that all states require HBOT facilities to be OOMS accredited, though none currently do. Experts, including Peters, say that fires like the one that killed Thomas are rare. OOMS estimates that 7 people have died since 2009 due to fires, suffocations, or other adverse events in HBOT chambers. But they expect to see a further rise in deaths as well as injuries as HBOT spreads across med spas, wellness centers, private homes, and other non-medical settings. You could think of it almost as if massage parlors were giving out antidepressants that also might explode. Peters believes unsafe HBOT chambers may now number in the tens of thousands in the US. Meanwhile, MAHA influencers are glomming onto HBOT, and so are celebrities. Justin Bieber put chambers around his home and recording studio for his anxiety. Mayim Bialik and LeBron James swear by it. Mayim Bialik swears by it, so that's got to count for something. Something bad. That was just the first guy on my list. Next was Ginger Taylor, who handily published her to-do list as an IACC member on her blog. Gonna start calling that IAC, just so you know. Number 2, vaccine autism causation. Specifically, the differential diagnosis in the literature to differentiate between autism and vaccine-induced encephalopathy, if there is a difference. A clear path to a standard of care diagnosis when a vaccine injury is suspected by parents, and a clarification of the responsibility of doctors to a child when a potential vaccine injury is reported. Number 6 is a national registry of and partnerships with doctors who medically treat autism and associated disorders, and an end to the attack on dissident doctors. They love their registries of friendly doctors, don't they? Number 7 is guidance for physicians on recommendations for individual medical treatments for autism and its associated disorders, such as dietary interventions, gastrointestinal treatments, anti-inflammatories, hyperbaric, detoxification, addressing infections, autoimmune conditions, and others. 8, the recognition and prioritization of individuals with severe autism. Ginger has a website where she describes herself as a Christian, author, speaker, advocate, and activist. She writes on the politics of autism, health, vaccination, informed consent, and both corporate and government corruption from a biblical perspective. And she apparently contributed to the book Vaccine Epidemic: How Corporate Greed, Bias, Science, and Coercive Government Threaten Our Human Rights, Our Health, and Our Children. Catchy title. She served on the Spiritual Advisory Committee for Children's Health Defense. What are all these words? And she was an advisor to RFK Jr.'s working group on research in 2024. She claims to be the creator of the first ever vaccine autism blog in 2004. So just a rampant anti-vaxxer. Then we have Liza Ackerman, who was the founder of TACA. Remember TACA from before, who organised the Anti-Vax March and has a directory of doctors. Then there is Walter Zahorodny, who has been advising RFK Jr. since his appointment and who was up at the podium with him during that press conference.
These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. We are doing this to our children, and we need to put an end to it. I think I'm going to have Walter Zahorodny, who is the most senior researcher for this project for ADDM and has been doing this for many years, to come up and say a little.
Autism deserves to be treated as a real public health phenomenon, and I would say is an urgent public health crisis. Autism is striking, and the consequences are lifelong. So I would urge everyone to consider the likelihood that autism, whether you call it an epidemic, a tsunami, or a surge of autism, is a real thing that we don't understand, and it must be triggered or caused by environmental or risk factors.
He kind of denies the role of awareness, the fact that we're actually assessing girls these days, that the diagnostic criteria has changed, and claims outright that it must be triggered or caused by environmental or risk factors. A claim for which there is no evidence. Here's Zahorodny with Jill Escher, president of the National Council on Severe Autism, who featured heavily in my video about the new calls for a profound autism diagnosis. Anytime you see Jill Escher quoting stats, there is a solid chance that they are coming from Zahorodny. And also, for some reason, one of her articles is available on the Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School website, where Zahorodny happens to be running his autism surveillance program. Here he is on an episode of Jill's podcast called Yes, There Is Obviously an Autism Epidemic. Now, the reason why I focused a lot on Jill Escher and the NCSA in the past is, well, because they're awful. She's awful. She makes videos outright bullying autistic people she finds online.
Sia has so completely capitulated to the neuromob. It boggles my mind how cruel, the abject cruelty of it. It's not just that they're irrational. It's one thing to be irrational. I'm not even sure what that means, but that's crazy. But now, Sia has autism. Hey, listen, Sia has something, I'm sure. Why do we have to call it autism?
What about another diagnosis? I mean, is there anything in the DSM? I mean, you guys are members of the APA, right? Some kind of personality disorder, maybe a mix of sensory disorder and anxiety disorder, or like what?
Her organization is staunchly anti-neurodiversity. She calls neurodiversity activists the neuromob and neurocrazies. And her channel has videos promoting weekly use of electroconvulsive therapy for the treatment of autism, which is not evidence-based at all.
The whole listen to autistics is getting taken a little bit too far, and I'm seeing a little bit too much berating of parents.
So electroconvulsive therapy, that's not to be confused with electric shock therapy, the kind administered by places like the Judge Rottenberg Center for the purposes of behavioral control, is a real treatment for highly specific serious conditions. It is evidenced for consensual use on patients who suffer from treatment-resistant severe depression and catatonia. In the USA, according to Mayo, ECT treatments generally are given 2 to 3 times weekly for 3 to 4 weeks for a total of 6 to 12 treatments. When undergoing ECT, you are placed under general anesthetic and a short seizure is induced. Risks of ECT include confusion, memory loss, nausea and muscle pain, and medical complications, including risks for those who have heart problems. But these risks are assessed based on the advised practice of no more than 12 total treatments. ECT is also not usually administered to young children, with different places having different rules on this, but in the US, the FDA has only approved its use on children 13 years and older, and it has not approved its use for the treatment of autism. So here are members of the NCSA advising parents of much younger children to administer weekly, lifelong sessions of ECT.
It was the only decision. So we went into it very enthusiastically because it provided some hope that we would be able to find something that might actually work after all these failed, attempts.
So, I mean, Jonah's been doing it for a long time since he was like, I think 11 and he's
11, yeah, it's been like 12 years.
He's almost 24. So yeah, so it's been a long time. There was no doctor in Philadelphia area, huge metropolitan area, who would treat a child as young as he was. Jonah has to go like 3 or 4 times a month still, like to maintain the benefits of ECT. And that's the really only real problem. It's, you have to keep going.
Next, Sylvia Fogel, who believes that something other than awareness, increased assessments, and changes in diagnostics must be the cause of the rise in autism diagnoses. While claiming to want to listen to all the voices in the autism community, she also believes that there is a subset of individuals with autism who feel autism doesn't need to be treated, that society needs to adapt. They interpret calls for prevention and treatment as eugenics. I believe these voices do not represent the bulk of the autism community and have been overrepresented in public autism debates, including at the IACC. Government agencies tasked with the prevention of certain kinds of neurology is a bit eugenicsy though, isn't it? She goes on to talk about, quote, common underlying changes in cellular and subcellular functioning at the level of mitochondria and oxidative stress and cellular functions, which is the main argument for treatments such as hyperbaric chamber therapy. When asked, in your view, is it anti-vaccine to ask if specific subpopulations are vulnerable to developing autism from vaccines? She skirts around it by saying, I want to just kind of come back to the phenomenon of neurodevelopmental regression, which I mentioned in connection with my own son. Studies show that roughly 30 to 40% of autism parents report acute neurodevelopmental regression. Large-scale population studies have not shown a relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism or the preservative thimerosal and autism. But we don't have very good data about neurodevelopmental regression or other potential vulnerable subpopulations. See, they don't usually, although sometimes they do, but they don't often just come out and say, yes, vaccines definitely cause autism these days. Rather, they will allude to unanswered questions that simply must be asked. And she didn't even say vaccines don't cause autism. She said specific vaccines and ingredients don't. And then she tries to draw a line between autism and neurodevelopmental regression, which is a term often applied to kids when their parents first notice their autism at around the age of 2. And when asked why she participated in an anti-vax documentary then, she said, I chose to participate because I believe that open scientific questions, particularly those involving complex systems such as immunology and neurodevelopment, should be addressed through rigorous, transparent inquiry. Just asking questions? Innit? Well, so am I. Like, what the fuck? Right, next on the list is Elizabeth Mumper, great name, who is the founder and CEO of the Rimland Center for Integrative Medicine. Remember that name? And she served as medical director of the Autism Research Institute. Remember them? The Rimland Center, of which Mumper is CEO, has the worst website I've ever seen. It also specializes in biomedical treatments for autism and other developmental disorders. It doesn't take insurance, but it does charge like $500 an hour for initial consultation, lab review, phone consultation, follow-up consultations for treatment planning and patient education. $500 an hour. Ode Lizzie Mumper has published scholarly works on autism's interactions with cytotoxicity, inflammation, methylation, and hyperbaric treatment. I only just noticed this as well while editing somehow, that she is currently a senior fellow for the Independent Medical Alliance. The Independent Medical Alliance used to be called Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, or FLCCC, a group of physicians and former journalists that advocated for various unapproved, dubious, and ineffective treatments for COVID, for example, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and other miscellaneous combinations of drugs and vitamins. It was started by these two guys, Paul E. Marrick and Pierre Corey, who would later join conservative or right-wing groups promoting COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy and misinformation. And in 2024, both of them had their medical board certifications revoked. And then it changed its name to the Independent Medical Alliance. So, that's good. Then we have John Rodakis, the founder and president of N of One Autism Research Foundation, which spreads misinformation on their website, such as autism is just a behavioral label. They hold that autism's behaviors are a byproduct of significant alterations in cell metabolism, immune function, neurological function, and the human microbiome. The alterations are likely mediated by environmental (external) factors. This view is developing rapidly and holds much more promise and hope for prevention and treatment strategies. In other words, there is reason to believe that these children can get better. One treatment they suggest as promising is Suramin, which is an anti-parasitic medication. In fact, they only feature 2 researchers. Quite the research foundation you have there. There's the Suramin guy, and there's one who thinks folinic acid can treat autism, Dr. Richard Fry. Remember that name. Get out all your pins. Folinic acid is also known as leucovorin. Leucovorin is usually used in the treatment of folate deficiency and as a part of certain cancer treatments. But despite there being really no evidence for its efficacy regarding anything to do with autism, demand for the drug has spiked. From the Washington Post. Normally, approval by the FDA comes only after years of large-scale testing. But Trump's September pledge to fast-track the drug, bypassing that process, has left many doctors on the front lines divided. At least 2 influential medical societies have come out with interim recommendations. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the Society for Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics both do not recommend the routine use of leucovorin for children with autism. And much like the other treatments that I've mentioned so far, chelation therapy, hyperbaric chamber therapy, electroconvulsive therapy, they are generally considered safe, but only for their intended purposes. For those with very specific conditions which require very specific treatments and which are severe enough to warrant risking the side effects. As pediatrician Kristen Soll said to the Washington Post, while the drug has shown very little in the realm of side effects, this is in the context of adults with cancer, not children with autism. Then we've got Laura Cellini, another proponent of the biomedical model, who is also involved with treatment for PANDAS, not the cute bamboo eating kind. It's funny, actually. A few of them are. A number of these appointments have supposed expertise in PANDAS. PANDS stands for Pediatric Acute Onset Neuropsychiatric Syndrome, and it used to be called PANDAS, or Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Streptococcal Infections, another catchy title. So like, kid gets sick and also suddenly exhibiting signs of OCD or ARFID. I had never heard of this before, so I looked into it, and it seems to be a pretty highly contested thing. It's not in the DSM as it's considered to be a medical diagnosis, but it also doesn't seem to make much sense. I've included some reports on it below in the description, as I don't want to get too sidetracked, but it seems like there is no strong evidence for the association with infection. The diagnostic criteria are like a bit of a mess in that they could easily be explained by other things like autism, OCD, and ARFID. And it seems, indeed, that the effective treatments for PANS-associated OCD and food intolerance are exactly the same as the treatments for quote-unquote normal OCD and food intolerance. Maybe it's just a coincidence that PANS seems to suggest that some sudden environmental change can cause this neurodevelopmental regression in previously healthy and neurotypical children, which is exactly how half of these IACC members describe their own autistic children. And maybe it's a coincidence that this was the primary argument of the anti-vax movement, that these kids were perfectly fine until they got the vaccine. It does seem like they're making some very similar arguments, except instead of vaccines, it's antibiotics or other medication. Tylenol, perhaps. So the next IACC member, Jennifer Phillips, became an advocate after her daughter's steep regression into profound autism at the age of 2, accompanied by the onset of several serious medical conditions.
Until a few short weeks before Kate's second birthday, something unimaginable happened.
Kate got sick at the age of 23 months, and she was treated with antibiotics for the first time ever. She wasn't like the ear infection kid or anything like that. She got sick and she immediately just started disconnecting. I couldn't even get her to look at me, and I was saying her name repeatedly, Kate, Kate, Kate. She was just off in her own world, and finally, I was almost screaming her name. One of two things is happening here. Either autism is not what we think it is, or my daughter doesn't have autism. She has a medical condition, emergency.
One of the difficult things of our modern moment is that it is nearly impossible to pin a cause on any singular problem. Our homes and our cities are filled with toxins and industrialized food. And yet our institutions remain uncurious about why the rates of autism have skyrocketed.
It's like a loss. It's the loss of not her physically, but it's the loss of our connection. It's a severed connection. There's always something missing, and that's Kate. She's there physically, but she's not there.
John Gilmore, who is the founder and executive director of the Autism Action Network. See, they all have their own organizations. It's wild how many there are. Like, we've got ASAN. That's basically it. Anyway, the, again, misleadingly named Autism Action Network is an out and proud anti-vax organization. John Gilmore maintains that his own child was vaccine injured. He has founded or co-founded like 7 or 8 separate groups and has been a thorn in the side of vaccine policy makers for years. Toby Rogers apparently writes and speaks about corruption in the pharmaceutical industry. The abstract for his PhD thesis, The Political Economy of Autism, starts off, "Autism is a global epidemic," and asks, what explains why public health authorities thus far have failed to ban or restrict intoxicants that have been shown to increase autism risk? And they all such good writers. Next, Bill Oldman. I just realised that I call him Oldman instead of Oldham, and I'm not sorry. Is an entrepreneur who has fingers in all sorts of pies.
Mr. Oldham's career started on Wall Street, working in the financial information services industry. Following this experience, Mr. Oldham has worked in financial, telecom, and healthcare industries. Mr. Oldham then sought to combine his health and financial interests in the rapidly growing value-based payment space, bringing fintech to health. Acela Health has grown to manage over $300 million in drug spend and more than $30 million in revenue with strong profitability every year of operation. In 2017, continuing to pursue fintech opportunities, Mr. Oldham founded a token-based cryptocurrency payment solution and a blockchain technology platform to support small to medium-sized businesses.
He founded the Thought Leadership and Innovation Foundation, which kind of looks like some sort of think tank / consultancy firm. They feature a project called the Autism Knowledge Gateway, which is apparently unifying the entire autism community around a fundamental need through an AI-driven technology hub, which you can pay for and get access to a library of research titles curated by autism-focused physicians. Oh, and he created Autism First, an ABA provider with 10 locations across the state of Virginia. They offer full-time ABA over 40 hours a week to 2-year-olds. And he's also a member of TACA. TACA. Then we have Honey Rinicella, who is the executive director of the Medical Academy of Pediatrics and Special Needs. Well, that sounds quite official, doesn't it? Let's have a look at them. All right. Well, Shit Charlie's Angels here isn't breeding too much confidence, but no, let's have a look. So they are a group of professionals who offer a comprehensive education and fellowship to medical professionals for the care of children and young adults with autism spectrum disorders and other chronic complex conditions. I'm not sure how much I trust people who don't even understand how capitalization in a sentence works, but no, let's have a look, see who they are. Not Anju Usman Singh! Remember her? From before, with the boy who died after she diagnosed him with aluminium toxicity, and in the lawsuit with Dan Rossignol. Wait, hang on. Elizabeth Mumper. I remember that name too. That's the lady from the Anti-Vax group. Hey up, it's Dan! Not Dan, but Dan Rossignol himself. Who else do I recognise here? Another Rossignol. It's Richard Fry. This really is the who's who. Elizabeth Bonker, she's also on the IAC committee. Oh, what a happy coincidence. I bet there was no need for icebreakers at this year's IAC meeting, was there? Honey also held multiple leadership positions at TACA. Good old anti-vax TACA. How many is that now from there? Like 4? Crystal Higgins is the executive director of the National Autism Association. See all these organisations with their names. Their website is full of the same stuff as all the rest. Webinars by Richard Fry about Leucovorin, information about mitochondria and the, quote, impact on internal cellular energy. Look here. How hyperbaric therapies can improve inflammatory and autistic conditions. Natural nutritional immunotherapy, an integrated protocol for the treatment of autism. She is also a Spelling to Communicate practitioner. Spelling to Communicate, or S2C, also sometimes called Rapid Prompting Method, or RPM, is an alternative form of communication in which a non-speaking person spells out what they want to say on a letterboard or keyboard with the help of a facilitator. This is controversial, to say the least. Multiple organisations have come out with specific advice against the use of S2C or RPM, citing its similarity with something called facilitated communication. Facilitated communication, or FC, is where a facilitator, usually a parent or caregiver, gives physical feedback to the person spelling. FC practitioners claim to be able to unlock hidden capabilities, and some of the claims do border on the miraculous, with young children showing deep knowledge of subjects that it seems they never had a chance to learn about. FC is usually considered to be pseudoscientific after dozens of double-blind studies show that correct answers to questions are only provided when the facilitator, not the speller, knows the answer. Spelling to Communicate is controversial because it uses similar techniques. S2C practitioners might hold a spelling board or an iPad in front of the person spelling. They might physically touch the individual, or they might simply give verbal cues. Now, this is a big topic, and it's not really one that can just be an aside to another topic. You might have heard of the telepathy tapes, in which facilitated communication is used to supposedly demonstrate telepathic abilities in non-speaking autistic people. I do plan on making a video about that at some point, so I'll be able to talk about this more in depth then. But I will say that A, we have to be really careful when discussing the intelligence and agency of non-speaking people, as well as people who might have problems controlling their motor movements. And so often these conversations do spill into outright ableist territory. B, facilitated communication and other similar methods absolutely have been abused. Non-speaking people absolutely have been exploited by their parents, as the presence of things like the telepathy tapes proves. I have seen instances of so-called communication in which it is entirely obvious that it is the facilitator doing the spelling. And I've seen examples where it's far more subtle. There are parents who are seeking to exploit their children, but then there are parents who have the absolute best of intentions and who just want to get to know their kid, and who may be unaware when they are subtly cueing outcomes. See, there are examples of individuals who started off using FC or RPM and who now use AAC entirely independently. And so it is my opinion that we don't rush to dismiss people simply for using a tool or requiring assistance in the early stages of their communication learning. But in my opinion, anyone even considering using methods like this should have as their top priority the full withdrawal of facilitation. And in my opinion, there are loads of really easy ways to do this. Like, for example, I see absolutely no reason whatsoever why the facilitator would need to be reading at the same time what a person is typing on an iPad. Like, you can just read it afterwards. Like, even the possibility of inadvertent manipulation by like well-meaning caregivers, like the fact that that is possible, to me, that should mean that full withdrawal of facilitation should be the top priority for anyone engaging in this. But it seems to me like that's not always the case. There's even other ways to provide sensory feedback, which is another one of their arguments, without you peering over and reading everything that's being typed. I'll save this for the other video. But what's important to remember today is this is still a big business. Parents can spend thousands of dollars learning these methods. A single session can cost upwards of $150. And due to the lack of empirical evidence supporting it, insurers are unlikely to cover it. And finally, F. These days, there is quite a big variety of AAC. That's augmentative and alternative communication devices and tools. There's not enough, granted, but more are being created all the time. Non-speakers like Jordan Zimmerman, who were thought to be incapable of communication, have used this technology to become activists, educators, writers, and all kinds of things. They use their AAC independently and effectively. And like I say, I see many ways that spelling boards can be adapted to remove the need for a facilitator. And I see ways that sensory feedback can be provided without the need of a facilitator. And I think it's worth noting that out of all this variety of types of AAC, the only thing being represented in this current IAC is S2C. And it worries me that FC and RPM and S2C practitioners will often argue that autistic kids are suffering only from a physical motor movement issue, that they are pretty typical kids trapped inside this autistic body. And there is a tendency among them to outright deny the existence of intellectual disability and learning disability, which I think is kind of shitty. And sometimes they just state this outright. And this idea of the real kid being trapped inside somewhere, that idea is exactly what has trapped autistic kids into enduring endless hours of therapies, treatments, and procedures, all in the vein of releasing the child from the cage of autism.
You know, I mean, she's there physically, but she's not there.
Okay, and like, don't take this the wrong way, but a lot of these people are pretty religious. And, it's fine if you are and all, but if you believe that God designed us in his image, that there was purpose and intent behind the design of human beings, then you are more likely to view difference as a result of something we did wrong, something we put into the environment. And you are also more likely to believe that your child has a soul which is them, which exists beyond their body. It's unfortunate to me that the two non-speaking members of the IAC are both working at the same organisation which promotes S2C. We need more non-speaking representation in policymaking. But unfortunately, it seems to me that even here, there are ideological motivations behind these appointments. Communication for All promotes S2C, and also that same chart we see wherever the idea of an autism epidemic comes up. Also, I don't think that's true. So I had a look at their board and partners. You've got 3 non-speaking people: Elizabeth Bonker, Dan Bergman, seen here, engaging in facilitated communication with his father, and Caden Larson, who is the other non-speaking member of the new IAC. Then you've got Elizabeth's mother, Jeannie Breen, a venture capitalist with a background in private equity and property management, and some other people who don't interest me. But I did notice that they have partnered with Elizabeth Torres, who happens to work on autism stuff at Rutgers University, which is where IAC member Walter Zahorodny works. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Now, Caden Larson, it says here, also serves on the board of CADE. That's Children with Autism Deserve Education. Having a look at CADE's board, there's him, John Byington and Tisha Mehta, who happen to work for Caden's mother's company, Holland Life. Now, Holland Life, bear with me, is part of the Holland Group, owned by Caden's mother, Jennifer Larson. Holland offers a whole range of services for autistic people, including ABA, HBOT, and something called microcurrent therapy at the Holland Biomedical Centre. Jennifer Larson, it seems, also helped to found the Canary Party along with Ginger Taylor from before. I learned this from Ginger's blog, which was pretty informative. I want to recognise my former partners, Mark Blaxill and Jennifer Larson. When we started the Canary Party in 2011, it was because Mark and the late, great Dan Olmsted had recognised that we had won the research debate in 2008, and that the establishment was never going to recognise it. So, this had become a political fight. We then began to pull together various parts of the health freedom community to work as one political movement. We have gone from tilting at windmills to becoming a foundational part of the international movement that is now known as MAHA, to joining the establishment. Mark is now working inside CDC, and Jennifer will be at the side of her son Caden, who has gone from being a non-verbal 11-year-old when we first started the Canary Party to a nationally known adult speller who will be advocating for people like himself on the IAC with me. To all of you who joined with us to storm the castle, you have my eternal love and gratitude. So Jennifer will be by her son's side at the IAC meetings. Let's have a look at this Canary Party thing. Oh look, it says here that Jennifer is a very active Republican and was a Ron Paul delegate for Minnesota to the 2012 RNC. Ron Paul is known for being a particularly conservative Republican. The Canary Party was founded by people who believe their children were injured by vaccines. Patty Carroll is a parent of 2 beautiful children, one of whom was permanently brain damaged by his well baby vaccines. Katie Wiseman is the mother of 15-year-old identical triplet boys who all have autism as a result of thimerosal poisoning. They are a libertarian, anti-vax, or at least anti-mandated vaccine organization. The third and final autistic member of the IACC is Daniel Keeley, who is apparently a high school senior with a strong interest in aerospace engineering, who enjoys singing and has expertise in aquatic plant care. Okay. Good for him, but that seems like an odd choice, except, oh look! Daniel shared his personal journey in The Folate Fix, published in March 2025 by Dr. Richard E. Fry. It's his book about how leucovorin can treat autism. I'm sorry, but this isn't even tokenism. It's so much more sinister. Alright, there's 2 more to go. Let's go. Tracy Slepchovic, US Air Force veteran and author of Warrior Mom, A Mother's Journey in Healing Her Son with Autism. Catchy. She integrates military environmental health training, lived parent experience, complementary and alternative medicine. Sounds terrifying. She founded Autism Health Inc., which is, quote, dedicated to advancing scientific research. Oh my god, aren't they all? Half of these people's nonprofits are all doing the exact same thing, it seems to me. Providing hubs of information, webinars, training, connecting families, all with the exact same ideology. That something in the environment caused autism and we need to figure out how to remove it from our kids. Yeah, look, they do scholarships, webinars, conferences, support groups. Why do they all look like this? Answers on a postcard. So last, but probably not least, I mean, who knows, maybe she is least, is Katie Sweeney. Sweeney, self-described autism warrior mom, oh my god, another one, serves as the executive support manager for MAPS. Remember MAPS? From before, the one with them all in it. She is also a proponent of spelling to communicate after trying it with her autistic son. Can you believe it? I forgot 2 people. Speedrun. Lisa Vidalite. I can't find much on her except for this interview where she doubts that increasing rates are down to diagnostics. She runs this project called My Heart's Home, which sounds very nice. It's supposed to be an assisted living project, but I don't see any evidence of it actually existing yet. All the photos on the website seem to be stock photos, and it does talk in the future tense in places. I think it's still in the planning stages, even though they've been around and fundraising for like 4 years. Best of luck to her. Then Elena Monarch, who, and now, you are not going to believe this, is a member of MAPS. She runs the Lyme PANS Treatment Centre and learned to identify and treat patients with PANS/PANDAS, tick-borne diseases and other inflammatory health conditions affecting the brain. Oftentimes, her patients have been misdiagnosed with psychiatric and neurological conditions. Her website claims that it is increasingly clear that many children and adults in New England suffer from tick-borne illnesses, and that when left untreated, bacteria such as Lyme and certain strains of strep can produce unexpected neuropsychiatric symptoms. Now, I don't know how many New Englanders have tick-borne illnesses, but Lyme disease sounds horrible and kinda noticeable. Weird to have a tick-borne disease specialist on the autism panel, but hey-ho, she's among friends. Sylvia Fogel also works at the Lyme PANS Treatment Centre, along with a dietitian and a yoga therapist, because we all know that the best way to fight bacterial infections is with yoga, meditation, and talk therapy. So that's them. That's all of them. Those are the people who are going to get to advise the US government on the allocation of funds. Most of them have their own organizations, and half of them are involved directly in the provision of things like pharmaceuticals, ABA, and HBOT. Half of them are anti-vaxxers, and it seems like all of them believe that autism is caused by something in the environment, be it medication or toxins. They all seem to reject the science behind the genetic nature of autism, holding that it is an epidemic and a public health emergency. Most of them are in the business of educating parents, and between them, they can reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of families across the USA and elsewhere. In my opinion, this committee is a disaster for autistic people and their families. The only people benefiting from the ideas that these members hold are the organizations which provide the various bogus and discredited treatments that they all seem to believe in. They had their first meeting the other day, and one of their top priorities, like the day one thing, was the adoption of the term profound autism for the use of research and policy. I made a video about this last year. It's a nonsensical classification which isn't based on autistic traits. It seeks to divide the autistic community in two, and this risks those autistic people with moderate care needs falling through the cracks. We had 2 diagnoses before, and it did not result in better outcomes for those with higher care needs. There is strength in unity, and despite what those people will tell you, we have more in common than not. My biggest fear is not only that it will divide the community, but that they will use this division as permission to administer all the experimental, potentially dangerous, and importantly expensive treatments that they like to those who they have deemed profoundly autistic. And I think more children are going to die. And when the wider community calls it out and complains and launches challenges, it will be dismissed as coming from people who aren't really autistic, as coming from people who don't really know what they're talking about. Because if you are able to talk, if you are able to be an activist, if you are able to show up at policy making meetings, if you are able to make your opinions known, then that means that you are not autistic enough and should not be listened to. And scarily, I have noticed an uptick in the past couple of years in young autistic people posting to social media in favor of this new diagnosis. Worryingly, it seems like they think that they are checking the privilege of low support needs autistics who are speaking over parents. We have no representation on this committee which is going to decide policy which affects all of us. There are a small handful of autistic-run organisations, and they get a minuscule amount of funding in comparison to these parent focus groups. The overwhelming majority of funds and resources go to parent focus groups and groups which the neurodiversity movement has been fighting for decades. The autism treatment industry is worth multiple billions of dollars per year. In comparison, ASAN, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, raises between 1 and 2 million a year. That's pennies. And by the way, it doesn't say low support needs on anyone's diagnostic report. What it says is requires support, and we don't get any. We aren't talking over parents. We're not even in the same room. Most of us can't even make it to our local policy-making meetings, let alone have the ability to fly around the world attending all of them like a bunch of these people do, with the backing of multiple venture capitalists. Do not conflate presence on social media with power. Autistic people are largely unemployed. This is the only job that I am able to do. Content creation is actually a really good fit for disabled people, which is why so many of us do it. And that's why you see us on your For You page, which is an echo chamber and not actually a reflection of society at large. And that's not power. In the rare instances where we do make it onto the For You page or the home page, that might mean a bit of influence, but not necessarily power, especially when we only really get views from people who already kind of agree with us. If you want to know who holds all the power, then go and see who is getting to have cozy wee chats with the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. Because it's not us. Autistic and otherwise neurodivergent, otherwise disabled people have been fighting these people, these exact individuals, for decades, and we are losing. They are engaged in decades-long astroturfing campaigns. They have a long game. This had become a political fight. We then began to pull together various parts of the health freedom community to work as one political movement. To all of you who joined with us to storm the castle, you have my eternal love and gratitude. Be careful whose propaganda you repeat to your followers. And remember, we do not gain ground by conceding it.